I want you to imagine an afterlife for a second, but not the one we usually talk about.
Right. None of those vague, floating on a cloud concepts.
Exactly. Not the nebulous, cloudy abstraction. We are not talking about golden streets or, strumming harps in this state of eternal passive bliss.
No, absolutely not.
I want you to imagine a reality that is hyper detailed and incredibly bureaucratic, honestly, and intensely, almost uncomfortably visceral reality.
Visceral is definitely the word for it. It's a cosmology where the realm beyond death is governed by physical and energetic laws that, frankly, make our own laws of thermodynamics look completely simplistic.
Yeah, it's wild. That is the architecture we are exploring today. We are taking a deep dive into excerpts from this towering, often terrifying piece of 20th century Brazilian Spiritist literature.
It's called Memoirs of a Suicide, or in Portuguese, Memórias de Suicida.
Right. It was published by the Brazilian Spiritist Federation back in 1955, and it's attributed to the medium Yvonne A. Pereira.
And our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack the internal logic of this specific universe.
Because it has a very strict internal logic, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. We are going to explore the mechanics of the soul, the literal environmental weight of psychological guilt, and this highly organized spiritual rescue system.
A system that operates with the logistical precision of, like, a cosmic humanitarian organization.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get too deep into the mud, literally, we need to establish a quick disclaimer for you, the listener.
Good point.
It's crucial to understand the parameters of our discussion today. This cosmology deals with the spiritual aftermath of taking one's own life, which is heavy subject matter.
Very heavy.
We are dissecting the world building, the mechanics, and the philosophical framework presented in this text impartially.
Right, we aren't endorsing it or telling you this is objective reality.
Exactly. We are analyzing it purely as a complex theological and spiritual architecture, examining its internal physics without taking a theological side.
So we're looking at the how and the why of this universe. And I think the first how we need to address is the methodology of the book itself.
Because the way it was written sets the stage for the intense physical reality of this afterlife.
Yeah. Yvonne Pereira bypassed standard psychography for this. Like, she didn't just sit there in a trance while a spirit moved a pen across a page.
No, standard automatic writing wasn't the method here.
She claims she was guided by the spirit of Léon Denis, who is a very prominent historical figure in French Spiritism.
Right, and the primary spirit author, who uses the pseudonym Camilo Cândido Botelho,
who is noted to be a famous 19th century Portuguese writer.
Yeah, and the methodology they used is deeply embedded in the text's overarching philosophy, which is this concept of living vibration.
Living vibration? What does that actually mean in practice for her?
Well, over a period of 20 years, Pereira claims she entered these states of deep magnetic sleep.
Okay.
And during these states, her consciousness, her astral form, essentially was extracted and brought into the spiritual dimensions to observe these environments firsthand.
Wow, okay. So she's actually going there.
Or, alternatively, the spirits would project these environments directly into her localized space.
Right. It's the difference between reading a textbook about a war and putting on a fully immersive haptic VR headset that just drops you straight into the trenches.
That is a perfect analogy. It is entirely experiential.
She wasn't just transcribing words, she was shivering. Like, there's this fascinating anecdote in the text where Camilo is detailing a bitter winter afternoon in a specific room in Portugal.
Oh, I remember that part.
Yeah, and as he describes the cold and the fireplace, Yvonne writes that she actually began to physically freeze in her physical room.
Right, she's looking around for a real fire to warm herself.
Exactly. While Camilo's spirit is essentially laughing at her visceral reaction to his memory. So why does the text make such a profound point of emphasizing this sensory immersion?
Because it establishes the fundamental physics engine of this entire cosmology. You see, thought is not an ephemeral byproduct of synapses here.
Okay, so it's not just brainwaves.
No. In this spiritual framework, thought is a living, creative, energetic force.
Right.
When a spirit of Camilo's density focuses on a memory of a cold room, the vibrational frequency of that thought literally coagulates the spiritual matter in the environment.
Coagulates it. That's an intense word.
Yeah, it manifests the room, the temperature, even the dust on the table. The text explicitly states, the word of a spirit is living, creative, real.
So you don't just exist in a pre-built environment. Your mental state actively generates the environment you inhabit.
Exactly. Your mind builds the world around you.
But if your mind is literally forging the reality around you, that creates an incredibly dangerous paradigm, right?
So?
Well, if you've achieved a state of peace, sure, you generate a sanctuary. But if we follow the logic of this universe's physics, what happens when a mind is entirely shattered?
I see where you're going.
Like if someone's final moments are defined by absolute despair, trauma, and the violent destruction of their own physical body, what kind of architecture does that mind build?
It builds a nightmare. And I mean, not a metaphorical one.
A literal nightmare.
A tangible, suffocating sensory nightmare. If your consciousness is locked in a state of terminal chaos and self-annihilation, the spiritual matter around you bends to match that exact frequency.
Which brings us to January 1891 and the arrival of Camilo in the spiritual ecosystem.
Yes, the start of his journey.
Because Camilo's mind is a landscape of pure agony, he finds himself drawn to an environment that reflects that agony perfectly.
The Valley of the Suicides.
The topographical descriptions here are relentless. Like, Camilo wakes up in this deep region of sinuous gorges and jagged caves.
And there's no natural light at all.
None. The air isn't just dark, it is heavy, asphyxiating, and freezing cold.
Right, and it's filled with this soot-like substance that chokes the lungs of the astral body.
Yeah, and the ground is just this endless expanse of fetid, slippery mud.
It is an environment completely scrubbed of any soothing element whatsoever.
So no trees, no grass.
No vegetation, no changing seasons, no breezes, no stars, nothing. It is an ecosystem constructed entirely out of the low-frequency vibrations of pain, fear, and regret.
The source material uses a brilliant, though devastating, comparison to make us understand the absolute desolation of this valley. It compares it to the Valley of the Lepers in ancient Jerusalem.
That's a really powerful comparison in the text.
Right, because historically, the leper colony was the pinnacle of human outcast suffering. Rotting flesh, absolute social exile, physical agony.
But the text argues that the Valley of the Lepers would be a comforting resort compared to the mud where Camilo finds himself.
A resort? That's almost hard to wrap your head around. Why is the leper colony better?
The differential is the presence of the natural universe and the capacity for connection.
Okay, connection.
Yeah, and the leper colony. Despite the horror of the disease, a person could still feel the warmth of the sun on their face.
They could watch a sunrise.
Exactly. And more importantly, they could form a society. Two outcasts could share a meal, offer a word of comfort, maybe even fall in love.
So they retain the psychological capacity for hope?
Precisely.
But in the Valley of the Suicides, hope is literally, like, scientifically impossible because of the vibrational state of the inhabitants.
Right, they can't access it.
It's a crowded valley, too. The text calls them a sinister phalanx, noting thousands of spirits specifically from Portugal, Spain, Brazil, and African colonies.
But despite the crowds, it is an ecosystem of pure, impenetrable isolation.
Yeah, they're so blindingly consumed by their own individual psychological infernos that they are neurologically incapable of registering another person's pain.
Let alone offering comfort. They are trapped in a solipsistic loop.
A solipsistic loop. They just howl, they fight, they trample each other.
But there is no solidarity. They are blinded by the intensity of their own moral and energetic disruption.
When I read the descriptions of the freezing mud, the deafening storms of howls, the absolute darkness, my mind immediately goes to Dante's Inferno.
Oh, for sure. The text even explicitly nods to Dante, actually.
Right, suggesting he likely astral projected into this exact dimensional frequency, but just interpreted it through his, 14th century Catholic lens.
Yes, but we really need to clarify the theology here because it's fundamentally different from Dante.
Dante's hell operates on the principle of contrapasso, right? Divine retributive justice. A wrathful God or a designated judge looks at your sin and designs an ironic punishment for you.
Exactly.
So my question is there a judge in this cosmology sentencing Camilo to the mud?
That is the most vital distinction to make if we want to understand the architecture of this book. There is no judge.
No judge at all.
There is no punitive throne. The universe does not punish, it only reacts.
It only reacts.
Right. The Valley of the Suicides is a mechanical consequence of natural laws being violently disrupted. It is much closer to thermodynamics than it is to theology.
So it's like gravity. If I jump off a building, the concrete at the bottom isn't punishing me for a moral failing.
No, of course not.
The concrete is just the inevitable result of mass acceleration and sudden deceleration.
Precisely. In this framework, taking one's own life is not viewed primarily as a moral crime that angers a deity. It's viewed as a catastrophic violation of complex energetic physics.
Energetic physics.
The soul and the body are intertwined by highly specific frequencies that are meant to endure for a set timeline.
Right, a natural lifespan.
Exactly. When a person forces that separation prematurely, the resulting energetic chaos produces a specific, incredibly dense vibration.
So the spirit isn't sent to the valley.
No, the spirit gravitationally sinks to the exact dimensional layer that matches its dense, chaotic frequency.
Yeah.
It is pure energetic equilibrium.
Wow. So if there's no judge sentencing them to this valley, if this is purely an environment forged by the collective frequency of their shattered minds,
Yes.
what physically traps them there? I mean, if the mind is creating the mud, why can't a spirit just change its mind, think happy thoughts, and mentally teleport to a better environment?
That brings us to the underlying physics engine of this entire cosmology, the mechanics of the fluidic magnetic cord.
The fluidic magnetic cord. This is where the text moves from psychological horror to, frankly, intense body horror.
It really does. Grounded in its own esoteric biology, too. To understand why they are trapped, we have to understand something called the vital animalized energy.
Let's break that down, because animalized energy sounds strange to modern ears. What exactly is this substance?
Think of it as the heavy, dense fuel required to operate a biological machine on Earth.
Okay, earthly fuel.
The soul itself is composed of very fine, high-frequency energy. But to interface with a physical brain, a pumping heart, and a digestion system, the soul requires an intermediary energy.
Like a bridge.
Yes, a dense, earthbound fluid that bridges the spiritual and the physical. This is the animalized energy,
Got it.
and it is supplied to the spirit in a specific, mathematically precise quantum meant to last for a predetermined natural lifespan.
Okay, so let me try an analogy. Imagine the soul is a deep-sea diver,
Oh, I like that.
and the physical body is the heavy, atmospheric diving suit they wear to survive the crushing pressure of the ocean floor.
Right, the biology.
The fluidic magnetic cord is the thick umbilical cable running from the surface ship, pumping pressurized air and power into the suit.
Yes, the animalized energy.
Right, so if a person dies of old age, it's like the dive is naturally over. The ship slowly depressurizes the cord, the air supply dwindles, the tether safely detaches, and the diver easily swims up to the surface.
That perfectly illustrates a natural death in this cosmology. The animalized energy is exhausted. The cord unties smoothly, like a ripe fruit naturally dropping from a branch.
But in the case of a suicide, the diver panics and takes a knife to the umbilical cord while still at the bottom of the ocean, with the suit still fully pressurized.
The physical body dies immediately, yes. The machinery of the suit is broken.
But the spiritual body, the astral form, is still absolutely saturated with all that unused, dense, heavy animalized energy.
The battery is still completely full of earthly fuel.
Right, and more catastrophically, because the cord was violently severed rather than naturally untied, a fraying magnetic connection remains between the astral body and the physical corpse.
And this creates the most visceral torment in the book. The text refers to these as magnetic repercussions.
Magnetic repercussions, what does that actually feel like for Camilo?
Because that heavy earthly energy still coats the spirit, the sensory link to the biological shell remains active.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Camilo is in the spiritual valley, but he is still magnetically wired to his corpse in the cemetery in Portugal.
He literally feels the decomposition of his own physical body.
It is an unimaginable magnification of phantom limb syndrome.
Phantom limb, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like an amputee might feel an itch on a leg that is no longer there because the brain's map hasn't updated.
Exactly. In this spiritual physics, the spirit's map hasn't updated because the energetic timeline hasn't expired.
So Camilo feels the crushing weight of the earth in the grave.
He feels the dampness of the coffin.
He explicitly and horrifyingly details feeling the bites of the worms consuming his physical flesh, registering on his astral form.
It's brutal. And his torment is hyperspecific to the method of his death, too.
Right. The reason Camilo shot himself is that he was going blind and couldn't endure life without sight.
Right.
So he put a gun to his head and destroyed his optic nerves. But because his astral form is heavily saturated with this animalized energy, it perfectly mirrors the trauma of the physical body.
He arrives in the afterlife completely blind.
Because the physical violence translates directly into spiritual mutilation.
Yes, his blindness is the ultimate manifestation of his internal despair. He refused to see a way forward in life, so he literally cannot see in the afterlife, which further isolates him in the darkness of the valley.
But it's not just Camilo suffering in silence. The valley is filled with thousands of spirits, all saturated with this volatile energy, and all of them are projecting their final moments.
Because, again, thought is a living vibration. Their obsession with the exact millisecond of their violent death manifests physically in the environment.
They become trapped in a traumatic environmental feedback loop.
The intellect is fully awake, but it is corrupted by the trauma.
It's like a corrupted computer hard drive endlessly looping its crash sequence.
That's exactly it.
But the crash sequence is a physical hallucination that affects everyone around them. The text descriptions here are just brutal.
They really are. Like the spirits who threw themselves in front of trains.
Yes, they are constantly running through the mud, projecting the screeching metal and the physical sensation of being endlessly crushed, covered in spectral wounds.
Or the spirits who drowned. They are perpetually gasping, their astral lungs filling with phantom water, choking on an ocean that isn't there.
And those who poison themselves feel their spectral organs dissolving, eternally vomiting up psychic toxins.
And due to the localized density of the valley, you have to remember, these aren't private hallucinations.
Right.
A spirit reliving a death by fire projects the thermal radiation of those flames. A spirit running past them will literally feel the heat of the fire.
Wow, so it is a shared, solid hallucination forged by collective trauma and the misapplication of spiritual physics.
Shared trauma, yes.
Wait, if it's an exact one-to-one ratio of unlived time, say someone dies at 20 but was biologically programmed to live to 80, are you saying they are trapped in that sensory feedback loop of their corpse rotting and their crash sequence for 60 years?
Yes, that is the implication.
That math implies an incredibly rigid, almost merciless universe.
It certainly appears merciless from an anthropocentric emotional standpoint, but the text argues that it is the ultimate expression of impartial conservation of energy.
Because you cannot destroy energy, you can only change its form.
Exactly. The animalized fluids meant to sustain 60 years of biological life cannot simply vanish.
I have to go somewhere.
They must burn off, slowly evaporating through the agony of magnetic repercussion until the energetic battery is finally empty.
So the timeline cannot be cheated.
No. By skipping the earthly struggles meant for those 60 years, the spirit ironically forces itself to experience that exact duration in a state of hyper-concentrated, localized distress.
Okay, so eventually, the clock does run out. The surplus animalized fluid finally evaporates. The frayed magnetic tether to the rotting corpse dissolves.
Yes, eventually.
The spirit is completely depleted, exhausted, and desensitized. What is the immediate aftermath? Do they simply float up out of the mud on their own?
No, they are fundamentally incapacitated.
Incapacitated.
They have survived the energetic burn-off, but they are psychologically shattered and vibrationally too weak to move.
They need help.
They require an extraction. And that brings us to the operational logistics of the rescue.
Which introduces one of the most visually stunning sequences in the text. Amidst the howling, freezing mud pit, the absolute darkness, suddenly a highly disciplined rescue caravan appears.
The Legion of the Servants of Mary.
And the visual contrast is jarring. We aren't looking at ethereal angels floating on clouds. We are looking at a militarized logistical extraction team.
The text is highly specific about the aesthetic and operational structure of this caravan, because it wants to drive home the point that the higher spiritual realms rely on profound organization and discipline.
So, paint the picture of this convoy for us. The vanguard is composed of a platoon of lancers.
Yes, lancers.
But they aren't European knights or winged cherubs. The text describes them as having bronzed skin, resembling ancient Hindu warriors or Egyptian temple guards.
Right, carrying shields and sharp lances.
And they form a protective perimeter around a series of beautiful, enclosed white carriages, resembling stagecoaches, almost that are drawn by elegant, vigorous Norman horses with flowing white manes.
The medical staff, the carabineers, wear immaculate white uniforms featuring sky blue crosses.
The precision of these details, the specific breed of the horses, the cultural attire of the lancers, the uniform of the nurses, it Completely dispels any notion of a vague afterlife.
It is a solid functional reality.
And the extraction itself is conducted like a high-tech search and rescue mission. It's not a chaotic scramble to grab whoever looks the saddest.
Oh, definitely not. It's highly targeted.
The text describes a disembodied, booming voice echoing across the gorges, acting like a targeted PA system.
Yes, calling out exact coordinates and names.
It says something like, Shelter 36 on Street 48, proceed to the rescue convoy.
The leaders of the expedition use maps and devices that the text likens to advanced radar or spiritual telescopes to pinpoint the exact vibrational signatures of the spirits who are ready.
It is the ultimate expression of spiritual triage. They are not scanning for who is suffering the most. They are scanning for whose animalized fluids have completely evaporated.
Because that's the only metric that matters for a safe extraction.
Camilo hears his name. And we are introduced to the 4 companions who have shared his specific cavern of mud.
Geronimo, João, Mario, and Bellarmino.
All Portuguese, all having endured this nightmare together, they stagger out and manage to board the white carriage. But I want to zero in on the strict boundaries of this rescue operation, because it feels incredibly harsh, almost heartbreaking to read.
The boundaries must be absolute to prevent further catastrophe.
As the carriages fill up, thousands of other frantic spirits realize what is happening. They rush the convoy, begging, screaming to be taken out of the mud.
Naturally, they want to escape.
But the nurses in white do not speak to them. They offer no words of comfort. And the Hindu lancers actively use physical force.
They have to.
The text says 10 or 20 lances will immediately drop to form a barricade, physically blocking any spirit whose name hasn't been called from touching the carriages. How does the text justify a cosmic humanitarian organization acting so coldly?
Well, because taking them would be an act of violence, not mercy.
How so?
If we return to our deep-sea diver analogy, imagine a diver at the bottom of the ocean suffering from severe nitrogen buildup.
Okay.
If a rescue sub grabs them and instantly rockets them to the surface without decompression, the pressure change will literally tear their biology apart. The bends will kill them.
Decompression sickness, but on a spiritual level.
Exactly. The upper layers of the spirit world vibrate at an incredibly high, fine frequency.
So if they brought up a spirit full of dense energy,
If the caravaneers allowed a spirit whose battery was still full of dense, heavy, earthbound, animalized energy to board a carriage destined for those higher realms, the extreme shift in vibrational pressure would shatter their astral form.
wow. So the lancers aren't punishing the spirits left behind.
No, they are enforcing a vital quarantine. The spirits left in the mud literally do not have the vibrational clearance to survive the ascent.
That makes perfect sense within the physics of the book. But I want to ask you about the cultural aesthetics of this scene, because the diversity is striking.
It really is unique.
We have a Christian organization, the Servants of Mary, wearing blue crosses. They are escorted by Hindu lancers.
Right.
The expedition's chief medical officer wears a white clinical apron, but also a traditional Hindu turban adorned with a glowing emerald, and they're using Norman horses from northern France. What does this eclectic mix of religious and cultural iconography tell us about the sociology of this afterlife?
It reveals a deeply cosmopolitan and collaborative spiritual universe.
Mhm.
The afterlife here is not segregated into isolated religious silos where only Christians go to a Christian heaven or Hindus to a Hindu heaven.
It posits a vast, interconnected, universal bureaucracy.
Exactly. Different spiritual traditions and historical cultures retain their aesthetics and their specific expertise, but they pool their resources for humanitarian missions.
Like an interfaith coalition.
The Hindi spirits, representing ancient lineages of discipline and energetic mastery, provide the martial protection and the advanced magnetic medical techniques.
And the Christian spirits.
They provide the nursing, the compassion, and the organizational framework of the hospitals.
It is the spiritual equivalent of an international coalition, like the United Nations deploying a disaster relief force.
Yes, and the only currency is service.
Once those carriage doors are sealed and the lancers farm up to repel the crowds, the expedition finally departs the Valley of the Suicides.
The journey upwards.
And as they leave that heavy, localized atmosphere of shared trauma, the topography itself shifts dramatically, leading to a completely different infrastructural reality.
They transition from an environment built by chaos to an environment engineered for stabilization.
Chapter 3 details this arrival at the Hospital of Mary of Nazareth.
The sanctuary.
The carriages emerge into a region that is still desolate, covered in deep snow, but it is entirely peaceful. The howling stops.
The contrast must be staggering for them.
The text describes a massive fortress-like city rising out of the snow, surrounded by a protective moat. And the architecture of the hospital itself is specifically classic Portuguese style.
The environment is meticulously curated for psychological soothing.
Right.
The snow provides a stark, clean contrast to the black, fetid mud they just escaped. It is cold, but it is pure.
And the Portuguese architecture.
It's designed to trigger a sense of familiarity and safety for the arriving spirits, many of whom are from Portugal.
The carriages cross the drawbridge, and we see the intake process at a building called the Department of Vigilance.
The level of administration here is staggering.
It is. The men and women are immediately separated into different specialized wards, and then they undergo registration. But this isn't a clerk with a quill and parchment.
No, it's highly advanced.
The text introduces a concept that sounds incredibly futuristic, especially considering this was channeled and published in the mid-1950s. They use what the text calls singular discs to record the patient's histories. How do these discs work?
They operate as a psychic phonograph.
A psychic phonograph?
Yeah, in the physical world, a phonograph needle translates the physical grooves of a record into sound waves. In this spiritual intake center, the singular disc is a highly sensitive magnetic recording device that captures the living vibration of a spirit's thought.
So when the admitting clerk asks Camilo how he died, Camilo doesn't just verbally tell a story?
No, the very act of Camilo remembering his death generates a specific energetic frequency.
Okay.
The singular disc magnetically etches that frequency. It records his voice, but it also captures a perfect three-dimensional holographic projection of his memory.
Wait, really? Holographic?
Yes. It captures the exact emotional state, the visual reality, the unvarnished truth of his internal landscape.
It's an infallible, tamper-proof biometric scan of the soul. You literally cannot lie to the intake nurse because the machine isn't recording what you say. It is recording the vibration of your actual memory.
Exactly. And crucially, it means the spirit only has to endure the trauma of remembering it once.
Oh, that's incredible.
Right. The disc becomes their medical chart, allowing the doctors to perfectly tailor their psychological and energetic treatment without forcing the patient to constantly re-traumatize themselves by retelling the story over and over.
It is peak clinical efficiency fused with profound empathy.
It really is.
Once registered, Camilo and his companions are transferred to the actual hospital ward, and the relief described in the text is palpable.
They finally get to rest.
The ward is pristine. Blue trim, crisp white linens, large windows looking out over a tranquil park filled with fountains and doves.
They are bathed, their filthy astral rags are replaced with clean hospital clothing.
And they are placed in comfortable beds, and then they are served soup. But the text is very specific about this soup. It isn't just broth. What is the significance of the food here?
The soup is an application of culinary psychology.
Culinary psychology.
The text states that the broth miraculously tastes exactly like whatever the patient deeply desires.
Okay.
But more profoundly, the taste is engineered to trigger deeply buried, comforting memories. For these shattered men, the taste of the soup vividly recalls memories of their earthly mothers,
Wow.
of their childhood kitchens, of a time before their lives unraveled into despair.
It is spiritual nourishment designed to thaw the frozen, terrified core of their consciousness. It reminds them that warmth and love still exist.
And they are attended to by physicians who operate with an incredible bedside manner.
We meet two Spanish doctors, Carlos and Roberto de Canalejas, a father and son team.
Yeah.
And they work alongside Hindu doctors who don't use scalpels, but instead place glowing, translucent hands over the patient's foreheads to induce a profound, healing, magnetic sleep.
The physical infrastructure, the wards, the intake forms, the attending physicians doing rounds, it all reflects the core spiritist tenet that progression requires work, order, and structured methodology.
So no magic spells.
No. Healing a shattered soul is not accomplished with a magical wave of a wand. It is a clinical, energetic, and psychological process that requires immense expertise and dedicated infrastructure.
But the hospital beds, the soup, the magnetic sleep, these are just treatments for the paraspirit, right? The astral body.
Yes, the surface level.
The physical rest is just the scaffolding for the real climax of this section of the book. The true healing begins with a philosophical awakening.
Because once they wake up from that long magnetic sleep, the madness of the valley has receded just enough for logic and self-awareness to return.
The return of the conscience is the most painful yet vital step.
It really is.
The text highlights a deeply moving speech by one of Camilo's companions in the ward, a man named Mario Sobral. Now, Mario is an interesting figure.
He is
He was a bohemian, a sophisticated intellectual, a student of philosophy at the prestigious University of Coimbra in Portugal.
a very cynical man in life.
Yes, a cynic who ended up hanging himself. And as he sits in this pristine hospital bed, recovering from the spectral rope burns still etched into his astral neck, Mario breaks the silence of the ward.
He realizes the profound, devastating irony of his entire earthly existence.
He is forced to confront the absolute failure of his intellectual arrogance.
Exact.
He essentially gives a monologue where he juxtaposes his university education with the simple faith of his mother.
That's a beautiful moment.
He says something like, "I went to the university, I studied the great philosophers, I thought I knew how the world worked, but my mother, an uneducated woman who sat by the fire, and simply told me that we have an immortal soul created by God. She possessed the actual scientific truth of the universe, and my arrogance blinded me to it."
It is a devastating dismantling of the ego.
Mario points out the inescapable logic of his current state. He realizes, if you shoot yourself, a surgeon on Earth might save you. If you swallow poison, a doctor might pump your stomach.
But no one survives a successful hanging.
Right. He knows with absolute certainty that his physical biology is dead and buried. And yet, he is sitting in a bed. He is thinking. He remembers. He feels the pain in his neck, and he feels the softness of the sheets.
He deduces his own immortality.
Yes. He says, "If I am dead, yet I am thinking, it is because I have a soul, and if I possess an immortal soul, it could only have been engineered by a creator."
And this deduction completely breaks him.
But it breaks him in exactly the right way.
It breaks the shell of the ego.
Up until this point, the suffering of the spirits was entirely self-centered. The howling in the mud was the fury of an ego that realized it couldn't escape itself.
Mario's realization shifts his suffering from furious despair to genuine repentance.
He drops the rebellion.
He acknowledges a higher natural order that he violently transgressed.
He breaks down in tears, begging the Creator for forgiveness. And the text makes a point to note that his tears in the hospital are fundamentally different from the macabre, localized convulsions he suffered in the valley.
These are tears of humility.
Why is this specific moment of humility the philosophical climax of their rescue?
Because according to the text's cosmology, the ego is the root pathology of suicide.
Root pathology.
The act was driven by the ego's belief that it could dictate the terms of existence, that it could outsmart natural law and simply opt out of the timeline.
But you can't opt out.
No. The hospital can apply magnetic passes to soothe the astral body, and the soup can comfort the mind, but only humility, the surrender of the ego to the reality of universal laws, can actually recalibrate the soul.
So it's an internal fix.
Mario's repentance is the moment the patient finally accepts the diagnosis and agrees to the long, difficult rehabilitation process.
It is an incredible, sweeping journey.
It really is.
Just to trace the arc of what we've unpacked today, we began in the absolute visceral horror of the Valley of the Suicides. An ecosystem built of freezing mud, rotting magnetic repercussions, and the psychological feedback loops of corrupted minds.
A literal manifestation of despair.
We witnessed the arrival of a highly militarized, deeply multicultural, and logistically brilliant rescue operation.
The servants of Mary.
And we followed the extracted spirits into the bureaucratic, structured sanctuary of the Hospital of Mary of Nazareth, where the real, grueling work of spiritual and psychological reconstruction finally begins through the dismantling of the ego.
It presents a cosmology that is terrifying in its strict, impartial adherence to cause and effect, yet profoundly optimistic in its ultimate promise.
That no soul is ever permanently abandoned.
Exactly. No soul is ever permanently abandoned to the dark, provided they endure the necessary consequences and find the humility to accept help.
If we step back from the specific theology of this 1955 text and look at the bigger picture, the relevance to you, the listener, is just striking.
It is. Even if you view this entirely as a work of speculative philosophical fiction, it functions as one of the most enduring, complex metaphors for the human mind and the nature of trauma.
The core physical premise of the book, that we are inexorably bound by the realities our thoughts create, is a universal psychological truth.
Unresolved trauma, deep-seated guilt, and destructive actions possess a gravitational weight.
You cannot escape them through avoidance, and you certainly cannot escape them through self-destruction.
The mind will relentlessly generate an internal environment that matches its frequency.
The Valley of the Suicides operates as an incredibly accurate manifestation of severe clinical depression and isolation.
It really does. It is a state where the individual is trapped in a feedback loop of their own worst moments.
Unable to perceive the sun, completely incapable of connecting with the people around them.
Bogged down in a mental mud that makes every movement agonizing.
And the mechanism of rescue in the book mirrors the mechanism of psychological recovery. The carriages of the servants of Mary only arrive when the surplus energy of the ego is exhausted.
Healing only begins when the individual accepts the reality of their condition
When they surrender the illusion of quick fixes.
and submit to the structured, often painful, and highly bureaucratic process of doing the work.
It makes you realize that the mind isn't just an observer. The mind is the ultimate architect.
The physical world around us might just be a temporary scaffolding.
But the real enduring structures are the ones we are building internally with our beliefs, our actions, and how we process our pain.
We are constantly generating the environment of our own consciousness.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to mull over as we end this deep dive.
Something to take away.
We have spent this time exploring a universe where your deeply held thoughts, your unhealed traumas, and your foundational beliefs literally and physically construct the environment you experience.
The walls, the temperature, the very ground you walk on are forged by your mental frequency.
If that premise holds true even strictly as a psychological metaphor for how you experience your daily life, what kind of architecture are you building in your mind right now?
That's the question.
When you strip away the distractions of the physical world and close your eyes, what is the environment your thoughts are constructing? Are you slowly building a valley of shadows, or are you laying the foundation for a hospital of healing?